It is time again for an episode of Vintage Audio Review. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about an A/B test I did between two different RCA cables. Now, before I get into the cables, the backstory to this is my eldest son, I'll just call him Brett, has been souping up his Tesla Model 3, and the latest souping up involved the stereo system. So one day I got a text from him with a picture of this cable that he just bought. It was an AudioQuest Evergreen cable, 5 meters in length, $150 in cost, and it has a 3.5 millimeter stereo jack on one end and the two RCA jacks on the other end. He needs that to plug into his amplifier, which is in the trunk, and to bring it out so he could plug it into his audio player up front. I thought that was a lot of money to spend on a cable, and I went online to my favorite place for cables and connectors, AliExpress, and I found a similar cable for about $3, and if you had $10 worth of an order, you would get the shipping for free. So we'll just say it was about a $3 cable. So it also had 3.5 millimeter stereo jack on one end and RCA jacks at the other end, and it also claimed to be shielded. So when he came out to visit not too long ago, he had the AudioQuest cable, and I did measurements on the two, basic frequency response and THD measurements, and then we did an A/B listening test. This test was a lot easier to A/B because they went through the same amplifier. I had an Aragon 8008 amplifier, which there will be a review on. It's a very high-end audio amplifier, and we used that, and I used my Carver preamp. We used two different players. We used my Surfan's F20 audio player, and we used his, I don't know what it was, but it cost about 10 times the amount of my Surfan's player. And we plugged in a 3.5 millimeter to RCA jack, and from that we used Y adapters for each left and right channel, and you'll see pictures of that. And then those went into the auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2 inputs on my Carver C1 preamplifier. So basically you were just switching between auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2. The only thing difference between the cables was that little adapter and then the RCA Y adapters, and then that went into the C1 preamplifier. The only thing switched on the C1, it's a regular mechanical switch that switches between auxiliary 1 and 2. So it's pretty well as clean as you could make an A/B test. It's immediate, and we use the same amplifier, and so that was kind of the test. Let me get into the measurements. I'll show you the measurements first, and you'll see the test to test maybe the shielding of the two cables. Then I'll talk about some of the results with the A/B listening test. But right now, we'll show pictures of each of the little cables, and then we'll get into the data. There's not really too much data, just the frequency response and THD. Did either cable affect that? And then we'll talk about the actual A/B listening test and some other comments. So this is the packaging that the Evergreen AudioQuest cable comes in. This shows a close-up view of the AudioQuest Evergreen cable that I purchased off of Amazon. It looks like it came down in price a little bit, and I just kind of wanted to give you a better idea of what it looks like close up. Now I'm going to go to the one from AliExpress, which is the Recorin brand. It's only $3 now, or $2.94, and once again, free shipping for orders over $10. And if we come over here, we can see it's went into some detail about that it's shielded. You have shields here and here and here between your left, right, and ground wires, and then you have an overall shield right here, aluminum foil shield around everything. And I'll do a test a little later on to see how well these cables hold up to some interference I came up with. Right now I have placed the 5 meter Recorin cable, and I've placed that cable inside the $150 AudioQuest cable. Now the AudioQuest cable is larger. As you can see, the diameter of the cable is larger. They both have gold-plated connectors on them, and we'll just kind of see what happens on the bench, and then ultimately if they sound any different. And I needed to point out that in order to do the listening test as well as the measurements, I needed to use a 3.5 millimeter to RCA adapter, which are these guys right here, and they just plug into the end. They are 8 inches long, and they're part of the measurement system for both cables, so I just wanted to point that out. Here's the THD SNR plot at 1 kilohertz, and the frequency span on this one is going from 10 hertz to 50 kilohertz. We've got approximately 2 volts RMS or 6 dBV going into each cable. The Recorin or inexpensive cable is the one in yellow, the left channel, and the AudioQuest Evergreen cable would be the right channel or the trace in red. And you can see that there really isn't much difference. If you look at the THD as a percent, it's what, 0.0023 for the Recorin cable versus 0.0032% for the Evergreen cable. Now there really is no difference in these numbers. They're kind of measurement error. Now if you're thinking that the AudioQuest cable is got the better SNR at 107 dB versus 104 dB for the Recorin cable, this is the system limit with this signal and this attenuation that I've got going in for my analyzer. So if I swap cables around, these numbers would be the same. 104.4 would be for the Evergreen cable versus 107 for the Recorin cable. So there really is no difference between the two cables as far as the reality of these two numbers. They're both showing a very small loss. So that's just the limits of the system. Now if I play games with the signal level and the attenuator, I can get these numbers to fluctuate, but for the most part they're basically looking about the same. If I go ahead and let me turn off the Recorin, so that's our Evergreen cable, and if you look at that real closely, now if I turn on the left cable and turn the right one off, they're looking very, very similar. The difference in little levels here is just the system limitations. Here is the frequency response from 10 hertz to 50 kilohertz with a 2 volt RMS or 6 dBV signal applied to both 5 meter cables. The yellow trace or the left trace is the Recorin. The red or right channel trace is the AudioQuest Evergreen cable. And there's really no difference between the two cables, as you can see, out to 50 kilohertz. And to be honest, at 50 kilohertz, this is only down maybe 0.16 dB, and that is basically just the response of the analyzer. I swapped out one of the cables and put in an 8-inch BNC to BNC cable that I use for loop-through testing, and this is basically the response of the system. So there really is no difference in either cable as far as frequency response to 50 kilohertz. One other measurement I decided to do was to measure the crosstalk between the left and right cables. In this case, I was only able to use the Recorin or the cheap RCA cable as it is labeled in the graph. The AudioQuest Evergreen cable was gone with my son, so I only tested the Recorin cable, and it looks really good overall. It has a minimum of 98 dB of crosstalk at 20 kilohertz. The graph is from 10 hertz to 20 kilohertz. The two top traces just show kind of the crosstalk of the system. So the Recorin cable would perform better than most amplifiers. As a really good amplifier at 20 kilohertz would have 90 dB. So the cable would not be the limiting factor as far as any crosstalk problems. So right now we're going to test how well the shielding works for both of these cables, and I've kind of got them looped so that they're about the same size loops, the same number of turns, and this is going to be my interference source. So that's just a standard blow dryer, and it should generate some noise that this thing will pick up. Now what I'm going to do first is just turn this on when it's away. So here you can see that the SNRs for both cables are about the same as is the THD and the THD plus noise. So both of them provide equal immunity or non-immunity to the noise generated by the electric hairdryer. I wanted to show how I connected everything up for the listening test, and I'll start over here with this adapter, and that is a 3.5 millimeter to RCA stereo adapter, and this guy right here plugs into my Surfans F20 music player, and the right channel comes out over here, the left channel here, and this blue cable, or these blue cables, are basically Y adapters, and both this guy and this guy are electrically the same point, as are this guy and this guy electrically the same point. So the right channel is right here and the left channel are right here, and each of those plug into the respective 3.5 millimeter adapter that is needed to plug into the 3.5 millimeter jack on the 5-meter cables. So that's kind of how everything is connected. Now when I did my original measurements, I just measured it with this in place because you kind of needed this RCA to 3.5 millimeter adapter. I went back and looked at everything here, plus I had another adapter to connect this to RCA, and everything looked just fine. There was no frequency response degradation or THD degradation by using all this over the frequency band from 10 hertz to 50 kilohertz. For the listening test, I mentioned already that I had the Aragon 8008 power amplifier hooked up to the Carver C1 preamplifier, and the speakers that I used were the Wilson Watt 3 Puppy 2s. I think you can kind of see one of them back here. And my wife thinks they look like Darth Vader. Anyway, my son, I should mention, he's 35. He played oboe in orchestra and band throughout college and has a pretty good ear, and he did not know which cable was hooked up to auxiliary 1 or auxiliary 2. And at the end of testing, listening to a variety of music, we also switched the different players that we were using, and he really couldn't hear a difference. With me, of course, I'm not quite twice his age, I couldn't hear any difference between the two, and I listened to a variety of music before he came over. And so really the conclusion is that I would say that most people are not going to hear a difference between these cables. If you look at the Amazon reviews, people are saying how it opened up stuff and all that. Once again, maybe it opens up something for you, your wallet. I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a cable denier right now. But, you know, the AudioQuest cable is a nice cable. Both cables appear to be gold plated. I mean, I didn't do any tests to see if it was really gold on that little $3 cable from AliExpress, but you know, it looked like it's gold. So it's a thinner cable, and it might be easier to use for certain instances if you had to run it along something. But you know, there's no doubt that the AudioQuest cable you know, seems like it's a little bit more sturdy. But I don't know what you're doing with your cables. You know, once they're down, they're usually down. You can kind of make up your mind on this. Like I said, the cables are 5 meters long, so the little bit of adapters that I needed to use between them, if you want to tell me that that contaminated the path, okay, you can tell me that. I'm also going to post a link to one of the supporters of this channel. He's done a nice website on audio stuff, and he has a good article on a cable test he did with RCA cables, where he did some measuring of capacitance and inductance and that kind of thing. So I didn't do any of that with these cables. I just, like I said, I did the frequency response in THD, and there is no difference electrically with the two cables. You know, these two cables, no difference. Anyway, so that's kind of it. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. Hopefully I get more likes than dislikes. Cables are a sensitive topic to the audiophile world, but I try to reply to every comment that I get that's reasonable, and most of them are, even if they disagree with what I present. Also, if you have not subscribed to the channel, that would be a good thing to do to help the channel grow. And until next time, have a great day or night.